Hey everybody, so the purpose of this video is to go over the new FCC order on wireless infrastructure that was issued a couple weeks ago. It is only 155 pages long, and it couldn't be any more dense or packed than it is. The process has been a long process in getting to this point, and the FCC has been very, very careful in what they've done to ensure that the order that they came out with can sustain or withstand legal challenge. So it's a long order. There's too much, it would take too long to go through every single detail. I think the purpose of this video is to acquaint you with some of the basics, talk a little bit about some of the open questions that remain, and then leave it to you to explore possible answers to those. We anticipate having a webinar and a panel discussion, and we're open to creating other opportunities for discussing the order and what it means. The order is not in place. It will not be in effect until 30 days after it has been published in the Federal Register, and I don't know when that's going to be. Also, there's a section that interprets 6409 that is aggressive, and we're pleased about that. But the FCC recognizes that the impact of that section on local permit processes could be significant and require some change, and so they've given local jurisdictions 90 days to change their processes to conform them with the order's interpretation of 6409. So it's going to be a few months before those changes actually take effect. So we have time to talk through the questions. I would be very surprised if there isn't some kind of amendment to the order, because there continues to be some uncertainty, but we'll see. So there are 4 different sections in the order. The first section concerns federal environmental and historical compliance requirements under NEPA and what's referred to as Section 106 of the National Historical Preservation Act. In this section, which ostensibly the categorical exclusions that are either expanded or created are for DAS and small cell, but they aren't specifically identified as such. DAS and small cell are defined, and we finally have a federal definition of small cell. But the exclusions are not limited to DAS or small cell. They are limited by the size of the installation in some senses. Under NEPA, the exclusion for co-location on existing buildings and structures is clarified to include all accessory equipment, and it's further clarified to include backup generators. In addition, NEPA exclusions are clarified to cover non-tower structures, which are referred to as utility poles, water towers, road signs, and other man-made structures, as well as co-locations inside buildings. The one thing that's not included in this exclusion are light fixtures, light standards, lampposts, and other facilities used for public lighting, which I think is an oversight and something that probably needs to get reconsidered. Now there's a new exclusion that applies to utility and communication easements that are quote-unquote in active use. There are size limitations on installations in these easements, but these exclusions are not limited to co-locations on these facilities. It's really the construction of anything in those easements. And that's a NEPA exclusion, categorical exclusion. There is a size limitation, and the size limitation is consistent with the size limitations in the co-location national programmatic agreement. So you can't increase the height by 10% or more than 10% or more than 20 feet, whichever is greater. You can't add more than 4 equipment boxes or more than 1 shelter. And there cannot be excavation outside the easement. Now under Section 106, there's an exclusion for utility poles and electric transmission towers. Again, so long as the co-locations, and to be clear, these exclusions in this section, other than the reference to construction inside utility and communication easements, are all concern co-locations. So they're not new exclusions for any construction. It's new exclusions for co-location construction. So under 106, for example, if you're quote-unquote co-locating on a utility pole, and the cumulative size of the co-location and the pre-existing equipment doesn't exceed 17 square feet, then the exclusion applies. There's also one of the issues that this order addresses, which I think a number of us are grateful for, is a definition that was in the co-location NPA that identified historic as anything more than 45 years old, and unfortunately, a number, if not a majority of utility poles are more than 45 years old, so every attachment to a utility pole required a Section 106 review. That's changed. Now, the mere fact that a building or a structure is over 45 years old, that alone is not enough to trigger Section 106 review. However, facilities that are inside the boundary of a historic district or within 250 feet of the boundary, or that are located on a structure that's a designated landmark or is listed or eligible for designation, those are still covered. And then there's this open issue of if there's a pending complaint concerning adverse effects on historic properties, those would be covered also. But the exclusion does cover buildings and non-tower structures that are over 45 years old, in addition to towers. Also, there's an exclusion for co-locations inside buildings, and then there's a recognition that DAS and small cell may just be of a type of installation that warrants exclusion under all circumstances or almost all circumstances, in which case, and the Commission's willing to investigate that through what effectively it would be a new programmatic agreement. They call it a program alternative, and they expect the development of that to take about 2 years.